Yes, and one of the species that lives in this jungle would be the publishing animal. And you've promised to give us an outline of this perspective. Publishing Director Alison Mitchell, please.
So thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm slightly embarrassed that as a native English speaker, I haven't prepared a joke to start with. But I got a laugh. But what I have done actually in my career as a publisher, I started as an editor, so I have actually taken the liberty of editing the title that I was given and that is on your programme. I've done two things. First of all, I have removed the word law, because particularly in this company, I would not profess to have any legal expertise. And secondly, I've just slightly adapted it to say it's a publisher's perspective. I can only speak on behalf of what we do at Springer Nature, and that's what I'm going to try and talk you through today. So, believe it or not, we do care about copyright. On this slide, the points on the left, you've probably heard some of before, but I do think it's a good place to start. Why do publishers care about copyright? I'm going to talk a little bit about open access in this talk, but actually the fact remains that a large proportion of the content that's published by publishers is under the subscription business model, where we get revenues from people paying to read the content. We're therefore very interested in protecting our interest in the investment we've made in creating that content. And it's not just the content itself. We are able to, for example, produce special projects and supplements by reusing the content. So again, we would like to have the rights to do that. One of the other things that we want to do is actually ensure that we're protecting ourselves by having the rights in the first place to publish the content. So this is why we insist on the agreements with the authors, so that we can ensure we've got the rights, and not just with authors, but with other third parties from whom we get content. What you may not consider is we do actually care about our authors too, and on the right-hand side of this slide are some of the things that we're trying to do on behalf of our authors when we're thinking about rights. Again, in the way we want to ensure we have the rights to publish, we want to ensure that our authors are protected also. So, for example, if they're using material from third parties, that we ensure they've got the permission to do so. We also want to try and ensure where possible that their work isn't reused without credit to them, or with it in a way that they would deem to be inappropriate. I just want to stick with the authors for a minute, because I think as publishers, as researchers, as people who care about these issues, we think a lot about rights. But actually, we know that many of the researchers on the ground care much more about doing their research, and they're not thinking about rights in the way we do. And I thought I'd share with you a kind of nice anecdote that we found shortly after we'd launched our fully open access journal, Scientific Reports. So what the little pie charts show you here is some of the options that we gave our authors in terms of the licensing arrangements. On the first chart, from the period from June 2011 to July 2012, when we did our agreements with authors, we offered them the choice of taking the Creative Commons non-commercial share-alike license or the slightly different non-commercial no derivatives license. We had them in that order on the form, and what we found was that 72% of those authors opted for the share-alike license. Then in July 2012, we decided we would also offer them the opportunity to use a CC BY commercial license. So we added that to the end of the form, and we were quite surprised to find that this seemed to change the proportion of authors who took the different license types. So if you had share-alike first, then no derivatives, then CC BY, you suddenly found more authors clicking on the middle option. So we wondered, is this really what they're doing? So we then did a little period and we changed the order. So we started with no derivatives, then share-alike, then CC BY. And you can see that once again, we saw a change in what the authors did. Now, actually, this is totally non-scientific, and indeed, if they were truly clicking the middle option, then we got the wrong result in the third instance. But I think what it shows is, certainly at that time, when these license types were quite new, there was author confusion. And this is actually borne out by the point at the bottom of this slide, that we've heard all sorts of misconceptions from authors about what they can and can't do with the various license types. And just to complete that story, in 2015, we moved to avoid the confusion that we'd seen to give authors a default position of CC BY for our open access content. We did make the other license types available. Authors had to request them, and fewer than 1% did so. And in fact, just this week, we've taken the decision for our fully open access content that we'll only offer CC BY, because actually, as I'm going to say on the next slide, this is the accepted standard for open access content in STM. We also publish a number of journals in the humanities and social sciences. And for those journals, actually, we've had researchers expressing a little bit more concern about CC BY and the implications of it. But most of our fully owned journals are in the STM space. I think it's really important, and it hasn't come up yet, to mention the funders. Because actually, Patricia spoke about some of the ways in which publishers are really kind of trying to increase access, which is great that she did that, but a lot of that is actually driven by the funders and what the funders are asking for. So the green open access route that's facilitated by publishers was actually mandated by the NIH. We do for, certainly at Springer Nature, for our authors, deposit on their behalf, and we have embargoes of between 6 and 12 months. And I thought it was also worth mentioning the Gates Foundation, who've gone one step further and are actually now mandating that all of their researchers who are funded by their funds have to publish down the gold open access route. So you can really see how, when we're talking about who moves the needle here, that actually the funders have an enormous amount of power and that the publishers do indeed listen to them. Another area that hasn't really come up too much today, but is really important, is data. And here I think publishers can afford and should be more permissive in what's allowed for researchers with their content. The right of this slide is a snippet from an editorial in Nature on the 8th of September this year, where we announced that for all of our Nature-branded research journals and Nature itself, we will require that our authors include information on whether and how others can access the underlying data. We've already, for many years, strongly encouraged authors to deposit their data either in community repositories or in places like Figshare or Dryad to make those data available. Additionally, within the Biomed Central Open Access portfolio, authors are required to publish their data under a CC0 non-attribution license. And again, we're assessing across the portfolio whether and how we might extend that across more of our journals. And just backing up the point about general confusion in this area among researchers, last week Figshare released a report that was based on a survey that was done with Springer Nature, which stated that more than half of academics who've openly shared their data are unsure about the licensing conditions of doing so. So I think we as publishers actually can play a role in helping researchers to understand what they can and cannot do with their data and encouraging them to share it more freely. This subject has come up already, text and data mining. Here again, I'm just giving the Springer Nature perspective, but I would like to think we are cooperative and permissive in this regard. Obviously, with respect to open access content, TDM rights are automatically included, but we also allow TDM for subscribers to our academic and government subscribers. We do charge corporates or those who are using the TDM for commercial gain. It's worth flagging the Crossref platform at the bottom, because Crossref is actually a cross-industry group who are trying to help publishers' content to be brought together on one platform for text and data mining. One other thing, linked open data. So this is where we make the metadata around our articles freely and publicly available under CC0 license, so that again, third parties can create new discovery tools on the back of that. So finally, I did want to talk about subscription content because, as I said at the beginning, we still have a lot of content that's published under this model. For about the last 10 years, Nature Publishing Group has, for its primary research content, not requested authors to sign over copyright. We've had an exclusive license to publish, and we've very recently taken the decision that we're going to extend that philosophy across the whole Springer Nature portfolio. One kind of caveat there is that we do publish quite a large number of titles on behalf of scientific societies, and we cannot make policy decisions for them. But for the journals that we own, we will be moving towards a license to publish. That's for our primary research. We do, on the nature side, still ask authors to assign copyright for our Nature Reviews journals, for example. And the logic here is that we have added extensive value into the creation of that content. And that's not to say we haven't for primary research, and I'm happy to talk more about that, but there's a specific case on the Nature Reviews journals that I've illustrated here, which is when we work with an author to produce a review, they will send us a scribble on the back of an envelope. Our editors will work with the author to create something like you see here, and our art team will draw it. The editors, when we create reviews, are really deeply involved in structuring and working with the authors, and that we believe is a sufficient justification for us to ask for the copyright of that material. The last talk spoke about author agreements. I was scanning it carefully. I very much hope we're not guilty in any of those. But I will say, actually, we do, in our author agreements, contain some of the warranties you saw there, that it's not libelous, that it's not in any way infringing anyone else's rights, because actually we have a strong position, and I think one of the places where publishers will add more and more value going forward is in safeguarding the integrity of research. And again, for the Nature journals, for several years now, we've done a lot of work about reproducibility, about robustness, about really working with researchers to improve how and support them in how they do research. We're also trying to make it easier for authors in terms of developing automated systems for collecting copyright. And as I said at the point at the bottom, we're facilitating deposition for green open access. I wanted to end just with a relatively new initiative, which is content sharing. So again, it was mentioned earlier, the fact that researchers share content. They have done for many, many years by emailing PDFs to each other, or more recently, by posting onto places like ResearchGate. And what we've tried to do at Springer Nature is actually not to shy away from that, not to tell them they can't do it, but to facilitate it. So in December 2012, we undertook a year-long pilot on our nature.com platform of allowing subscribers to take a shareable link of an article that they could then email or post or send to non-subscribers. To be clear, this link provides a version that's viewable but not downloadable or printable, but it is nonetheless access to the content. I personally was quite nervous about this because obviously we do have a subscription business model for these journals, but what in fact happened is that there was no impact on our subscriptions, and so we've now extended this, and we announced it on the 17th of October across the whole Springer Nature platform. Not only have we done that for subscribers to non-subscribers, but every corresponding author now gets emailed a shareable link when they publish their article so that they can share it with their colleagues. So that was all from me. Just one last thing, as I have your ears. You'll notice I've put my ORCID ID here. ORCID is nothing to do with Springer Nature, but this is a cross-industry scheme for researcher identifiers. And the reason I wanted to give it a plug here today was because if there are researchers or people from institutions here, I think this is a really great way of helping researchers to be linked to the work that they've done and to get credit. So if anyone doesn't know about it, please do take a look at orcid.org, or I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alison Mitchell.